Okay, I'm back. I'm a little bit nervous if I'm gonna have a shake. I had very few left that I have found. I had one this morning, so I'm like, how am I gonna do it? Um, some people were confused if I was in the hospital and wrote me, like, are you still in the hospital? I didn't go to the hospital. The neighbors had called because I was, I had, in the course so far, over 50 bags of trash. So I was bringing up the barrels, and I couldn't stop. My ticks, the shock ticks, PTSD, like this shock triggers. Um, that was one of the worst in terms of the immediate, you would hear the shock scream. And so of course the neighbors heard this and everything, but then when I like fell, um, I guess they called the ambulance, they called the fire department, and that was when like it was several men, like four. And was like, "Are you okay? Like, say yes or no." And it took me a long time to say, "Ye get yes." So, like, I didn't want to go to the hospital, leave Fila. And I know I've been there before for psych, but they don't do shit. They might inject you with like liquid Ativan or something to get you to shut up and then tell you to stop wasting your time. It's they literally don't you don't get more fear of hospitals. Um, and I've had my head scanned and there's nothing wrong with my brain. In terms of the physical. Which is important because you could get concussed, you could get tumors. There are things that can cause this, but mine is trauma. Speaking of uh one reason I couldn't come on the other night, for those that are on the OnlyFans for um whatever reason you can't be, I there are people that see I had to change my phone number that I gave out because I kept getting prank calls on it. So um I don't know what I'm gonna do about it for tomorrow. We'll see. But um anyway, I thought maybe those people, the haters, were like trying to harm me some more by doing that. And it really hurt to see I want to shake. Don't you love this? Isn't this what you like? Right? Huh. Ugh, man. That they were celebrating the death of Rex. Um, through the fact that it was causing me pain and in my great suffering, this was pleasurable to watch for them. And they were actually hoping that I would hurt more and that I would come on more and show more signs of suffering from years of trauma. Um, and so you guys know, like, my belief right now is that that dog is Rex. I mean, he's already had that name. That's already has been his name for over a year. But also that it's Rex, like, sharing the soul, like, in a body. Like, to me, when I look in his eyes, I was like, "This is" and how I found him and stuff was like, "This is Rex." And so in my mind, it's like so much pressure. It's like I told him, like, "You're gonna come home. I'm gonna get you home with me." And so knowing that they're going to evaluate the house, it set me into such a spin because it's like I can't let Rex down. Um, I can't. So, and I knew I would get hurt. I know, like, I didn't do my back any favors having to do this. And thinking about it now, it is possible in theory that even though I don't know anybody to help me, that there may be some type of a web app to locate maybe like college students or people that have the strength to help me for a bit of money to lift some of these things. But I have so many fears, and especially like strange men in my home and stuff that you find on the internet. Like, I don't know, I just felt, oh, I can't do that, but I have to still do this. So I knew it would hurt my back. And like my hand though, let's see if you can. Do we sometimes it does the light doesn't pick up right away how bad it is. Because it's getting anyway. It's there. So what happened with that, the the sex swing, which I wanted to pull out to put the other swing to, because you could latch the sex swing part that used like spread that I use on the OF. But also, remember I had bought over a year ago now at the Aldi, and they had the summer clearance that it's like you hook on like a tree that's like a swing, and I had ideas about setting it up, which like when would I have the space, but I had brought out those planks, heavy steel, you can imagine, right? And I'm trying to get them through the garage door, and they're kind of tight, but then when one of them fell, so it would have been this way, and to the other one is behind the hand. Think about here. So it's trapped in. So essentially, um, if this was my hand, this is steel against something hard, like it can't and a surface because it's narrow. It's like that's where you get this. And I do worry if that you can see from there. If I broke like a piece of the bone or something, because it does feel not right. Um, but I knew I would get hurt. So I remember crying to you guys and saying, I know I'm gonna get hurt. Like I just don't see any way of doing the amount of work that I have to do and not get hurt. Like you guys that work, physical jobs or have for a lot of years, like tell me you never got hurt. Like I think I think that to me, I knew I would get hurt. And I still have more work to do, but I see the light where it feels like if I hang on to this, sometimes it's hope and sometimes it's belief, like that I can get him, that I can get this done, that I feel a little more calm and at ease. But I felt like the weight of my dog, which is my world, on my shoulders. And can I do it? And then it's like everything that I've done, like I said, 50 bags of trash, right? It's literally like going up the mountain is step by step. It's piece by, and it looking at it, and some of it's like very heavy pieces, and you feeling that it's very hard. I mean, I've heard people describe being on like Adderall. I've never done that. I've never been diagnosed as ADD. I've been diagnosed as PTSD. Um, but I've heard it described as you can like focus on. I have trouble with so much. It feels like wow, this is impossible. um, so the fact I've been able to still try and accomplish so far as much as I've done, I feel proud of that. But it's not over. And in fact, I'm thinking. Sorry, let me read a bit of what you're writing. I know you're giving me encouragements. Oh, I hate whenever someone says, "I'm just popping in," I stop reading right there. Like, I just there's no need to continue. I'm just popping done. Um, oh, you're wearing your gloves. That's another thing I want to acknowledge. I can't stand when people preemptively blame me for my own suffering. Like, they tell me to be careful so they can preemptively have a say that it's my fault. Like, here's one way that you're at fault. You didn't listen to me. I told you. That's the opposite of support. That is just the opposite of support. It just makes me sick. So anyway, where was I? Oh, you know, I'm managing like I don't have family. I don't want to say I don't have support because I have you guys and you guys are my only support. So, um, while that's helpful, it's like I try to take on, as you can see, like with the house, everything that I want to do, like with having business, selling makeup and skincare product, and um, I'd like to show you my store. Like I'd like to show you um my sales, and maybe some of you I could. Um, but I feel like again, like with giving my phone number and I got all those prank calls, like if I gave out my eBay store, that people would abuse it to get me banned. Like they would make orders and then false complaints or that they would use a form of harassment. I mean, there are people just watch me suffer. Um, like my pain is literally their enjoyment. That's like a hobby. So I have to be aware of that. There, and you never know where they'll lurk. So that sucks. But if I could show you, you would see it's a lot of work into it and listing, and it's one person. And part of me thinks, well, maybe if I hired somebody, but I did try. If you guys remember when I would try to sell clothing years ago, I did try to hire a person, but she was a meth addict that just like kept half the clothing and didn't actually list anything. Like there were a couple of blurry pictures that weren't right. Like it would be a blurry picture of a bikini top and it would just be called jeans. And I paid her $500 a week, and it was all my money, like, from Jack in the Box, but I was getting my advice from YouTube on how to be a reselling business so I could get out of the Jack in the Box. And they said, like, what you gotta do is hire people and, like, build with that, like anyway, that wasn't so I think I have that fear of trying to find help and how would that work out and the ways, like, the pitfalls potentially and, like, to have someone help me organize, like, for the business and, um, it makes it sound all very serious with soaps and eyeliners and things, and foundations. Um, but I try. And anyway, it's nice to see it coming together. Sheila's having quite a fun time on that rug. Last night she was spinning around and it's too early, and I can see it coming together when it gets the other dog and they can play. And but there, but there's still some quite a bit of work ahead of me, and I have tonight. I don't. I would like to take a bath, if not tonight, tomorrow, soon. I could use up so many products. It's like I was like only half joking. I was like, this is a form of decluttering because I like to that Epsom salt, baby, for like those aches in your back. And I got that new water heater replaced, so it gets too hot too, though at first for a while. Like I still need to figure out how to do that. But yeah, sometimes I do that like black African soap and lavender and luxuriate, and I'm like, this is self-care, this is declutter, this is Zen, baby. Get a book. But it's also can make your heart weak. It's very hot. Um, a lot of people have had like heart attacks in the bath. Didn't that one of those guys from Friends? Um, what else? So you can get weak and it can take a lot of time, so maybe better for later. But that may be my plan tonight. We'll see. What is tonight? I lose track of days. Thursday. Isn't it Thursday? Ooh, I wonder if I'm behind an episode of Poker Face. I've been really loving this season and last season, but Did you see the one last week with that creepy little girl, and she's like, "I'll find you when you're older." The fuck? Slut sakes. A bunch of cowards they are. I Who takes joy in watching somebody grieving? I was gonna say 5 minutes after their dog died, but it probably wasn't even. It wouldn't be this phone. Um, I'm so glad I have so many pictures of him, like, happy and everything, but I'll still, like, a picture of um, the blanket his body was wrapped in, and, I wanna get him back, you know? It's a lot of pain, and to see someone in so much pain and just all smiles like, "Oh, look at her suffering over." Have you never lost an animal? Like, have you never lost something that you love? Sorry, this is, does it isn't isn't the one I was thinking isn't the one I was thinking of, but this one here, yeah, that must have been real. That was the blanket, but the one I had seen, he's in the car. Actually, you know what's funny is that show that Rob said not to watch it. I'm gonna watch it when they have more episodes. The cremation guy. But I didn't even doubt that this company was legitimate. They got the paw print and his fur and everything. But that's so horrible to just not even the right person's ashes. Like, you have no respect for. Well, the list is endless of what you don't have respect for. Uh, Anyway, I'm sorry. I wasn't reading yesterday, and my voice. I actually made some tea. I got a coffee too, to help soothe my voice because with the screams, I actually get quite sore. Um, it's not controllable, you know. Um, but so we ended right at a chapter, and I believe where we're picking up is the beginning of him and Elizabeth, his wife, and him packing up for Montana. Never been to Montana. What is it called? Big Sky States? Right here. He's going to Montana. Headed to Montana in July. What for? Horses? Horse rodeo? Wine red. Yeah, I found this in my cleaning. It's nice finding things in your cleaning. Um, Yeah, so this is my cup of tea, and it is still piping hot because I microwave it for like 3 minutes. I was looking for that throat coat, but I couldn't find. But I got raspberry, which is supposed to be good for cramps. I got I think I got mints. I make a concoction. Mm. Oh yes, chapter 20 is titled New Ireland. So, off to the new land, far from gaslit interiors and dinners at Delmonico's, far from graveyard eulogies for young men, far from the familiar. Maher went first to Minnesota, talking his way into a job with a professional immigrant, James L. Fisk, whose trade was guiding pilgrims from the flat land to the promised land. Ah, thank you, Jerry. Woohoo! Congratulations, new members. We love you. Jerry's so generous and sweet. Ah. Maher had heard Fisk speak in New York, where he sketched a picture of a big sky country. I was right. So full of gold dust, you had to shake it from your hair after lying on the ground. Was that true? Did Montana really have gold? I mean, I know California up in some way had gold. Did Texas have gold? I don't know. When I think of gold, gold's supposed to come from aliens, right? Like meteors. I don't know where in the world is gold. I mean, hey, I guess it's rare. Supposedly it's in Fort Knox, but I heard that people were like asking Trump to audit Fort Knox or something to see if there's any gold. Hey, he could fill it, right? Didn't he have like a gold toilet or whatever? I must see about some gold in them there hills. Yeah, shake it from your hair after lying on the ground. That real gold, like that Goldschlager. Afterward, with the war still on, with friends in the press now enemies, with the jabbing questions of father-in-law Peter the Great about their future, he and Libby had taken the first steps toward a fresh chance in a faraway place. They would start from scratch, unknown, unfettered. Maher would find a place to build a life. His wife would follow. The permanent home that had long eluded them would be theirs at last in the Rocky Mountains. Something much larger than any one couple was envisioned for the unturned ground that touched the clouds in the west. Eastern cities were not healthy places for the immigrant masses. The New York riots showed just how toxic the tenements had become. Maher himself had urged the Irish to leave the thin walled, smoke filled, low ceilinged hovels of urban America for the open aired promise of the high country. But how? A transcontinental move was not cheap. Gold was a lure, of course, a lure and a gamble. All you needed was a plan, a pick, a strong back to sift yellowy flakes from the gravel of a steam bed. Okay, show of hands. Who here thinks if they were alive during the gold rush, they would have gone looking for gold? I don't think I would have. I really don't think so. I think I would have been like, yeah. Yeah, sure, y'all moron, your shit. Yeah, I'll pass. Yeah, right, Rob. You're probably outside right now listening to me with headphones while you got one of those metal devices, like seeing if one of those nude models left any rings out there in the cornfield. All you needed was a pan, a pick, a strong back. Well, I don't got that. to sift yellowy flakes from the gravel of a steam bed. So with the pitch. Big strikes and little gulches had drawn deserters from both armies to Montana. $50 million in gold in 3 years' time. That prompted thousands of men in California to leave for the snowbound north. The Homestead Act, which went into effect on the same day as the Emancipation Proclamation, was a greater attractor. You didn't have to be a citizen. You could just intend to become one, to lay claim to 160 acres, free land. The two most powerful words in the 19th century, American West. Single women, former slaves, immigrants, all qualified. Yet a poor family living in the filth of Five Points, a neighborhood still said to have the highest murder rate of any slum in the world, could find enough reason to stay put. At least in Tammany Hall could guarantee meal money for turning a shovel in the city. The Irish were not loners or mountain men, had little experience as ranchers, sod busters, or prospectors. They cherished community, clan gatherings, that doesn't sound right. Rituals attached to place. Montana Territory was the end of the earth, a big blank spot on a map. No offense, but still is, really. I mean, what the hell is it in Montana? I mean, isn't that why people go there? Ah, land. Okay, I prefer California. But what if a swath of that big blank spot was set aside as a lasting home for the exiles of Erin, a refuge, a colony, or something in between, still under the American flag, but free of English Protestant domination? The Mormons had their Zion at the Great Salt Lake, a theocracy with its own militia and a radical sexual philosophy that allowed old men to marry teenage girls by the dozen. Reminder to self, do a rewatch of Big Love. Mormons still are in Salt Lake. Although most, um, city foundations are set up by waterways for obvious reasons. Free blacks were establishing towns on the Kansas frontier and beyond. Free love advocates were drawing up communes for islands in Puget Sound. The social frontier followed the geographic frontier. From Dublin, the American consul William West floated an idea in the final months of the Civil War. The plan put Maher at the center, though he'd yet to be informed. It has long since occurred to me that, in compliment for his valuable services and those of the Irish soldiers generally, it would be fitting acknowledgment on the part of our government to select some desirable portion of our territories and call it New Ireland, of which no doubt General Maher would in due time be elected governor. The consul wrote Secretary of State William H. Seward. New Ireland? Why not? There was a New England, a New Jersey, a New York, a New South Wales in Australia. Well, hey, there's New Mexico, right? What about New Zealand? I'm sure I'm missing some new place. uh, but no place where the Irish diaspora, now footloose after the war, could plant its stories and religion, where people could become something more than laborers, servants, or embittered ex soldiers scarred by Confederate grape shot. Seward never acted on the suggestion, and there's no evidence Marr was told of the grand design for the wayward son of Waterford, the part that had long been prophesied for him. But he was thinking along the very same lines. He was also hoping to stake his claim to some of that gold in the Montana dust, or get a piece of raw ground that could be turned for city building and quick profit. The two routes to overnight wealth in the West. While in while in Minnesota, Marr got word that his status as a western-bound traveler had been greatly elevated. By telegram, he was informed that President Andrew Johnson, the Democrat named to Lincoln's National Unity ticket in 1864, had appointed Marr the Secretary of Montana, the second highest office in the territory. As one of the primary architects assigned to organize the foundations of government and civilization in a raw-boned land, Marr would be fortune-seeking as well as nation-building. He had asked for such a thing while the war was still on. He'd sent a note to a high-ranking friend at the White House. Let me have Idaho. That was the original name for a territory stretching from the Dakotas to the east to Washington in the west, from the Canadian border in the north to most of present-day Wyoming. Marr didn't get Idaho, but he got the new Montana Territory, barely a year old, 143,776 square miles. At the time, there were more people living on the Lower East Side of Manhattan than the entire non-Indian population of Montana. I bet there still are. About 15,000. And nearly all those had arrived in the past 4 years. Marr's imagination turned. He sensed a second great migration, time for the Irish to move again en masse. Just as they'd taken one big heave-ho across the Atlantic, they could take another leap over the ocean of prairie grass to Montana. He'd been thinking about this for months, but in his diminished state, he kept these musings to himself. Now, with a small measure of his confidence restored, he shared some expansive thoughts. An Irish laborer with his wife and children hived into a badly plastered den in the back part of a tenement house in New York is very little better off than he was at home, he wrote a friend. Marr pictured that Irish laborer with some dignity, with his own hearthstone under his unshackled foot. In Minnesota, speaking to the Immigration Society, he expanded on this notion as he'd summoned his countrymen to war against the slaveholding South. He urged them to pick up and build something from nothing in the West. But getting from Manhattan to Montana Territory was much harder than crossing the Atlantic in a coffin ship, much costlier too. So what do you got to hitch like a wagon, like Little House on the Prairie? Where was Little House on the Prairie? That wasn't Montana. That what do they call those? Like maybe it's just a wagon. Maybe it's just a horse-drawn carriage. Ugh. And there was no like Terry. You think that you like to drive? You didn't have no headphones. The horsepower was limited. uh, Of course, nobody traveled in a straight line. You floated down a river or steam paddled up one. You hugged a valley floor by rail, stage, or wagon. Rode on the back of a horse until a trail lost its way in summer snow, and then cautiously stepped down a corkscrew of rocky turns overlooking straight drops to sure death. In the high desert, you picked up a stage again, or a fresh horse, now nearly 3,000 miles into it, and all the while wondered what you were thinking. Marr went down the Mississippi to St. Louis, the father of waters, all of it, under the flag again, From there, he chugged up the Missouri to Atchison, Kansas, named for the flame-throwing slave enthusiast. By stagecoach, he traveled over the grasslands to Denver, arriving in the mile-high boomtown in late August of 1865. His movements were heralded via telegraph and horse travel. In the first newspaper to pop up in the year-old territory, the Montana Post, this illustrious Irishman, the paper's editor informed his readers in September, would be bringing to the wide open country a persuasive elegance that held spellbound both Celt and Saxon. But the concept of New Ireland could not expect a hearing in the pages of the Post. The editor, Thomas J. Dimsdale, was an Englishman, Oxford educated, short, sickly, and humorless, with a waxed mustache and badger-like tight-set eyes. Dimsdale was also a strong supporter of a secret society that ran Montana Territory, without formal recognition or adherence to the Constitution. Sounds like the Wild West. I picture 1883. Well, it's 1865, so you're a little short. You're a little ahead, but close. Uh, he praised the general for doing much to improve the reputation of his dreadful people. He has made the name of an Irishman respected wherever the story of the deeds of the heroic Irish Brigade is told. With the pandering out of the way, Dimsdale put the incoming secretary on notice. 3 weeks before his arrival, he expressed hope that Maher, through a revolutionary at home, though a revolutionary at home against the crown, was now a good Irishman, someone who might reign in the hearts of bad Irishmen. The English editor had reason to fear the Celtic tide in the West. Members of the Fenian Brotherhood, their military skills hardened in the war, were making plans to invade Canada. They intend why? They intended to seize a few forts and hold them as leverage to get concessions from Britain. Okay, I guess. Canada would be the hostage. Poor Canada. And a free Ireland was the ransom. The plan was crazy, preposterous, and ill formed, yet somewhat plausible. Canada was lightly guarded. The British Empire's forces were elsewhere, trying to hold down natives in India, in Burma and Canton, in Africa, and the Middle East, ensuring the stamp of Her Majesty on a quarter of the Earth's land, from the Falkland Islands of the Patagonian coast to the Malayan states in the South China Sea. After the Civil War, the Fenians were flush with fresh members, Irishmen from all ranks. They were unafraid of England, indeed primed for a fight with the Empire. The plan to invade the North was not a well kept secret. It was publicized in the papers, aired out in meetings, heralded in a popular song. We are the Fenian Brotherhood. I don't know how it goes, so I'm just giving it my own beat. Skilled in the arts of war. Wait, how does this song go? We'll make a man out of you. I'm going full Disney, Jerry. And we're going to fight for Ireland, the land we adore. Where's my coffee? Many battles we have won, along with the boys in blue. And it sounds very like cop, right? Boys in blue. And we'll go and capture Canada, for we've nothing else to do. What the fuck? What? Okay, this is my favorite song now. Terrence, did that sound Terrence and Phillip? What's the Terrence and Phillip song? I vaguely, is that what they're like farting in their face? I'm sorry. That is at the song though, right? Go capture Canada for nothing else to do. I don't know. I mean, pick up a hobby, maybe. Have you tried what is that? Well, the women used to do like needleworking. You know, they used to make beautiful little houses on those little circular things. Little, like look at my needlepoint. Oh, that's lovely. Better than invading Canada, don't you think? Well, actually, Terrence and Philip are from Canada, right? Okay. Um, Maher had joined the Brotherhood a year earlier. He'd taken the oath to labor with earnest zeal for the liberation of Ireland from the yoke of England. And he'd recruited untold numbers of Irishmen to fight for the Union with an endgame of freeing the country of their birth. But he was also a representative of the US government. If it wasn't technically treasonous to advocate war against British territory on the American border, it certainly was less than diplomatic. In public, Maher underplayed his Fenian sympathies. From Denver, he crossed the front and the Wasatch Ranges of the Rocky Mountains, descending into the valley of the Great Salt Lake. Irish miners in the Mormon stronghold greeted General Maher as a Hibernian hero, there to release them from the theocratic hold of Brigham Young. His business was in another territory, north over the Bitterroots. By coach on the Overland Express, Maher set out for the last 475 miles of his journey, crossing the Snake River up over the Continental Divide at Monida Pass. And he's doing all this with his wife, right? Okay, I'm like, when you watch these shows, Terry, do the women look like haggard as hell? Or do they look like they just come out of like a Victoria's Secret catalog, except instead of like lingerie, it's like prairie dresses or whatever? Because you'd be looking like shit, like doing all this. And I'm sure he wasn't letting her go like nude bathing in the lake or whatever, letting the Indians look at her. I cannot even imagine. And down through the mountains upon mountains to icy waters that drain to the Pacific, all told, he had passed through the homelands of the Omaha and the Pawnee. I'm so glad we have planes nowadays. The Sioux and the Arapaho, the Utes and the Shoshone, the Cheyenne and the Crow, the Nez Perce and the Blackfeet. They had stitched their languages, their customs, their rituals, their religions, their livelihoods to the big blank spot on the map. But Mar knew little of the natives, save for what he heard around the campfires of panicky pilgrims. Downslope from the divide, still more than 6,000 feet above sea level, Mar entered a world unlike anything he'd seen on any of the three continents he'd lived. No place in Ireland held summits of snow in late summer. No creature in Tasmania was the size of a grizzly. Ursus arctos horribilis, 700 pounds of beady-eyed bear. I could take that. I could take that. No mountain in the east was as high as the no-name peaks bracketing the territory, a horizon of jack-o'-lantern smile granite and slate, a vertical world larger than many European countries. But where were the valleys and sun-kissed lakes, the places to grow potatoes and apples and wheat, to raise pigs and cattle, to build cities? Mar was not alone in his disorientation upon entering Montana territory. Wondrous, yes. In the late light of summer, a painting worthy of Albert Bierstadt's brush. But did snow really fall every month of the year? Rained, snowed, and hailed all day, wrote one new arrival, James P. Miller, in his diary on June 16th, 1865. A few days before the calendar proclaimed summer. Oh, great. You guys got snow in 10 days or so. Horrible weather and very cold. And then, in the first week of September, just days before Maher's arrival, Miller told of trying to get to the town Virginia City that had just been designed or designated the new territorial capital. Up 6:30, snow 3 feet deep and still snowing, and still summer. So I don't know of anything that can grow in the snow at all. And I think mainly because, well, the cold temperatures I think is inhabitable to most living things when plants are. And also the sunlight. So if snow is on top of something, it's not catching light. Although potatoes grow underground, don't they? And I think it can be relatively cold to grow potatoes, actually. I mean, I'm not totally sure. I've never grown anything in my life. Wait, no. I kind of remember growing something like in elementary school, but I think it was like a worm. Like, like I don't even know if I grew a sprout, but I kind of remember growing like a mealworm. Like you watch it get fat. I don't know. Did you guys ever grow anything in school? Wait, so now I feel like I have bragging rights. Like I basically know all about farming. Hey, listen, you had to feed those bugs, with something. I don't know what they eat. It's weird the things looking back on that they have kids do, but I don't know. Make a light with a potato. I'm just saying they must grow something during the uh, seasonal, you know, periods, but we'll see. Well, what fell from the sky never bothered an Irishman. What mattered was underground, or barely beneath the surface. Surely it would not take much to get rich in this place. I'm resolved not to turn my back on the Rocky Mountains until I have the means to whip my carriage and four through the New York Central Park and sail my own yacht with the green flag at the Mitson Peak, within 3 miles of the Irish coast, he wrote a friend. 3 miles of the Irish coast? As a wanted man, he could get no closer. And in the meantime, you lived well off the fat of the new land, yes? See, I keep forgetting he's a wanted man. Because isn't it kind of like if you're in a different country? But then again, it's like it's like Roman Polanski's like whole life, right? Like technically you're a wanted man. Although I could almost see Trump pardoning him because I heard someone say, "Oh, he might pardon Diddy." Bitch, bitch, why? Like, why do you want to collect the the Pokemon of approval of what P Diddy, Kanye West? Who cares? A certain type of cactus in Montana? I'll stick to my Tamagotchi or whatever. That's not growing. That's a video game. What is one of those farming video games? That's not a real farm. You don't eat that shit. You gotta get your hands dirty, son. Okay. Dear parents, nothing is sure here but what one has in his hands. So began a letter home from Cornelius Hedges to his family in the Midwest. I have seen about enough of the mountains as I desire without I get some good pay for it. It is a hard life at best, full of self denial and hardship. Living is very high without any luxuries. We hardly ever see any fruit. Vegetables are scarce. Everyone expects to make a fortune any minute. Life is full of danger here. We have lots of men who are ready to murder for a few dollars. Only yesterday, a man was shot not half a mile from town in open daylight and robbed of all his money. Sounds like Chicago, right? I wish I could have some apples and cider once in a while. I dreamed the other night of eating apples. He wrote these words from Virginia City 10 days before Maher's arrival. Yeah, but the thing is, most things are done by like shipping, not everything like we eat came from our state. I mean, California grows a lot, but not everything. And like look at the Alaska and Inuit people. Like, yeah, they could raise like a lot of fish, you know, but they could buy shipment, get whatever anyone else could, But I guess back then you had to wait for people to make a long trek to bring some, I don't know, grains or whatever would last. Um, So yeah, an apple, maybe canning some apples and shipping them would be better. Mm. The bromance ended in Pride Month. When is Pride Month? Mm. Are you proud to be Irish and gay? Sorry, I had to add the last part because it's Pride Month, right? Okay. The end of the coach line was Bannock, a mining camp that already had the shamed appearance of a played out burg barely 2 years after it sprang to life in southwestern Montana. Government, such as it was moving to Virginia City. The buildings in Bannock were shingled shacks with unpainted fronts. The main street, a dust choked by way smelling of horse shit. I can't read a horse shit without laughing. Well, Terry, how are you planning on celebrating? So, are you ready for the parade? You would be the perfect gay leather daddy if you were gay. You have all the, well, not all the accoutrement. You may be missing a few things. We could get you. And I bet you could dance too if you had enough of that sweet Irish whiskey in you. Okay. Oh yes, I remember where I left off. The horse shit. Speaking of, I just watched last night. I think it's new. You know, Trixie Mattel and Katya is like the stage name of, I forget his name, but like Criterion, Closet. Like I don't know, it's like some like conceptually, it's pretty simple. It's like a closet of movies that Criterion has um preserved, and they'll have like a celebrity go in and make picks, and sometimes depending on the celebrity, it's it's entertaining if you like the celebrity. Anyway, they had him on. Maybe I'll send it to you. It was so funny. He said, "So I'm gay." So I like, but it was so funny. It was really. I'll have to send it to you. It's like 5 minutes, but it's really funny. He's like, and being gay, like I have to like this, or and being gay, it can get really depressing. And it was just, I don't know. He's great, and he picked what was that Catherine Deneuve movie? Um, Belle de Jour, and I haven't seen that. I don't think. He's like, well, like a housewife, but she becomes a prostitute. But I thought she was dreaming. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's funny. Like, so I'm gay. Not a tree in sight. What pines that once stood had been burned for fuel or spliced into framing timber across a brackish little waterway. Grasshopper Creek slouched a huddle of tents and leaky sheds, home to Confederate deserters. Maher was met by the governor, Sidney Edgerton. He was dressed for travel and packed to go with his family. A radical Republican with a long face whiskered to an arrowhead, Edgerton looked like a Gothic preacher with a. Seems to me men had interesting facial hair back then. Why don't you guys get creative with your mustaches anymore? Afraid? Why don't you make one half like pink and the other half like green and show some personality and pizzazz? Maybe like a little crimp gemstone. Do I need to have a line of fashionable beard accessories? For, I forget. A Gothic preacher with a toothache. He'd been governor for a little more than a year, and before that, the territorial judge. When Maher asked a few perfunctory questions, he discovered that this richest territory had its own way of dispatching people on the wrong side of right thinking citizens. The sheriff, for example, what of him? That would be the late sheriff, a Mr. Henry Plummer. Late? Considerably so. He'd been hanged. Oh, was there a trial? No. A specific charge? Not really. But as one of the early leaders of these upstanding gentlemen had written in his diary, Edgerton could recognize a bad man when he saw one. Yeah, that's street justice. That's not justice. Wait, they killed the lawfully appointed sheriff without a trial or due process? He had it coming. How so? Plummer was handsome, well spoken, with a cloudy past. He'd killed a few men in California, and here in Bannock City, he dispatched a prospector who lusted for his young bride. Killed him in self defense in a saloon in front of dozens of witnesses. After the victim fell with a gunshot in the gut, he blurted out, "You won't shoot me when I'm down." Plummer replied, "No, get up." Then he shot him in the chest and head. For this, he was applauded and months later elevated to sheriff of Bannock City by a grateful citizenry. I would get the fuck out of that city. I would hear the story and be like, okay, slowly walking backwards. I was just heading out. Uh, nice to see you folks. Dip that. Honey, honey, get in the car. We're out of here. What? Montana? I yeah, see, that's the wrong place. I misheard. I thought this was uh Wisconsin. Mm, but in that shooting, the right-thinking townsfolk had soured on Plummer. They decided to take the law into their own hands. First, they strung up two people in Alder Gulch, where Virginia City was forming around a cleft in Montana's Bristol Hide. And then, in January of 1864, they went after Sheriff Plummer. The vigilantes suspected Plummer was stealing from coaches carrying gold dust. They had no hard evidence of this, just rumors. People said things. Also, he deputized men known to be outlaws. But none of this was presented before a jury or subject to a trial, or even explained to Sheriff Plummer before his neck was snapped. After forming the Vigilance Committee, 24 men swore out an oath. We, the undersigned, uniting ourselves in a party for the laudable purpose of arresting thieves and murderers and recovering stolen property, do pledge ourselves upon our sacred honor, each to all others, and solemnly swear that we will reveal no secrets, violate no laws of right, and never desert each other or our standard of justice. So help us God as our witness, our hand, and seal this 23rd of December, 1863. The quote, laws of right weren't written down. Right was what the Vigilance Committee, meeting in secret, judged to be right. Sounds like a gang to me. Their ranks included a banker, a storekeeper, a few merchants, at least one lawyer, and assorted pioneers. But no speller, apparently. The committee had formed after one man had been hanged without legal trial, sent to his ignoble grave with the authoritative words, "Men, do your duty." Sheriff Plummer was the third victim. On a day when the temperature dropped to 30 below zero, Plummer was dragged from a cabin, bound, and marched to an execution site. Wilbur Sanders, an attorney, the leading voice of the Vigilance Committee, joined the abductors at the moment of the killing. Stone-faced, he addressed the sheriff. "It is useless for you to beg for your life," he said. "You are to be hanged. You cannot feel harder about it than I do, but I cannot help it if I could." Plummer still begged. Just a year or so earlier, he'd opened his home in his town to Sanders and Edgerton, given them Thanksgiving dinner. What were the charges? He had the right to a trial. At the gallows, the rope was tied around Plummer's neck and pulled tight. The doomed man asked for a good drop. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't put that on the brochures for Montana. Come hang with us. Papa Smurf. Papa Smurf is hot. Papa Smurf's got it going on. I could be your Smurfettes. Killing the sheriff seemed to whet the appetite of the vigilantes for more summary executions. A few hours later, they decided to murder Jose Pizantia, called the Greaser. His crime? He was a Mexican, unlikable, with a temper and no friends and bad intentions. Everyone said so. When the righteous mob tried to break into Pizantia's little cabin, he fought back in self-defense, firing at the home invaders. 2 men were wounded. The commotion attracted a bigger crowd. They went to the house of Sidney Edgerton to fetch a small howitzer. With the big gun, the men blew open the Mexican's shack. Storming inside, they found Pizantia on the floor and filled him with bullets. His body was dragged across the ground outside and strung up for all to see. But they weren't done yet. People were invited to take shots at the dangling corpse. Oh my God. What do you call that? Montana Pinata? You know, this is why it's good that television was invented. I bet I was gonna say I bet there's less murders on nights where there's like a big game, but there's probably murders connected in their own way for that. Like the World Cup, like who knows? Um, but back when like I Love Lucy was on, I bet there were less murders. Jack Benny. Okay. Uh, Another suggestion followed. A proposition to burn the Mexican was received with a shout of exultation, wrote an early chronicler of the Vigilantes. When the fire was stoked to a high blaze, Pizanthia's body was thrown atop it and charred to a crisp. By the end of that month, 20 people had been killed after being targeted by the Vigilance Committee. Maher knew nothing of these citizen sanctioned murders. He had only just arrived in the territory. But here, meet one of the good men, Governor Egerton, introduced him to his nephew, Wilbur Sanders, the same Wilbur Sanders who was the guiding voice and moral authority behind the wave of hangings, burnings, and assorted homicides committed under the cover of do it yourself justice. He'd been the nominal prosecutor, or the nominal prosecutor, and it was he who commanded men do your duty. Sanders, like his uncle, was a radical Republican, favoring revenge and repression against the conquered Confederacy, taking a much harsher view than Lincoln had. He expected that the new territorial secretary would be a political fellow traveler. After all, Maher had broken with his party and his fellow Irish to support the former president. Montana was full of Democrats, Sanders explained. They were all rebels and traitors, as he called them, unfit to exercise the right of self government. And given that Maher had made headlines a few months earlier by supporting the one thing that many Democrats feared most, granting ex slaves full citizenship and the right to vote, Maher was urged to keep his distance from the opposition. That is, if he wanted to govern effectively. Govern? Yes, Edgerton had more news, more jarring. He would be leaving on the very stage that had brought Maher into town. He was taking his family east away to school for his daughter. Did President Johnson know about this? Was the leave authorized? No, Edgerton was fleeing the territory without permission and fleeing in haste. But for how long would he be returning? He offered no assurances, and one more thing, finances. There were none. No money from the federal government yet for building roads, no money for erecting public buildings, no money for raising a militia or bargaining with the Indians, and no money for salaries, Maher's included. With that, Edgerton handed Maher a sheaf of official documents, wished him the best of luck, and disappeared. He would not return for 25 years. Maher then would be governor of Montana Territory, an Irish fugitive overseeing an area twice as large as England, acting governor Thomas Francis Maher as of now. With the formal papers of the territory packed into his saddlebag, Maher rode to the new capital of Virginia City, 75 miles to the east. Over 11 hours, he crossed Rattlesnake Creek, trotted over khaki-colored foothills and fields, then went on to Stinking Water River, named for the sulfuric hot springs that bubbled up at its edge. Anyone settling in New Ireland would have to get used to brown shock as the summer sun bleached green from the land. When the skies weren't threatening snow, the temperature could climb to 100 degrees. Down Stinking Water, he angled toward Alder Gulch and Virginia City. Probably people pulling your barrels back from trash today. There, he was met with another shock, this one unrelated to color. The gulch no longer had any alder trees. It was cluttered with garbage, toilet pits, soiled bits of clothing and blankets, ramshackle sheds, and broken picks. The ground had been clawed open as if by a village of vision-impaired prairie dogs and never resealed. The quote city was thrown together on high ground, 5,761 feet above sea level, like dice on an uneven table that tilted down toward the gulch. A drunk could roll unassisted from the center of the main street to the gulch. Many did. Flies buzzed around manure piles. Rats scurried under the planks of boardwalks. The main reason that a cat was a prized commodity, a single animal selling for $100. Oh, to get the rats. Buildings were in various stages of rising and falling. Some painted, most not. A saloon owner had recently burned his bar down to get at the gold dust that had filtered through the floorboards. After a year of relative quiet, the vigilantes had issued another spree of death sentences in the days leading up to Maher's arrival, even though a new federal judge, Hezekiah Hosmer, had tried to dissuade them. Let us inflict no more midnight executions, the judge scolded the settlers, after reassuring them that all prior extrajudicial killings would be forgiven. But establishing the rule of law in a lawless territory was much harder than proclaiming it. The mayor of Virginia City, Paris Fouts, the man who laid out the town, was also president of the Vigilance Committee. On September 15, an unfortunate traveler named Jack Howard was hanged with a sign pinned to his body, robber. On September 18th, Tommy Cook was strung from a tree in Helena to the north. Pickpocket was the label placed on his body. Pickpocket? Not even England hanged a pickpocket. And on September 27, the day before Maher rode into town, a pair of men were executed in Virginia City. James Miller noted the ghastly scene in his diary. 2 men found hanging in the air this morning up the gulch, a little bit with a card on their backs, on which were the words, hung by the Vigilance Committee for being road agents. The executions were approvingly recorded in the pages of Thomas Dinsdale's Montana Post. He would soon be serializing a history of the vigilantes, painting them not as murderers or lawbreakers, but as heroes. To those who objected to a secretive clutch of men deciding who could live and who could die in a territory under the flag of a constitutional republic, Dinsdale explained that the vigilantes were justified even if the sun of every morning should rise upon the morbid picture of a malefactor dangling in the air. The editor welcomed Maher to Virginia City. The prickly and fastidious Englishman was trying to co-opt the Irish revolutionary. Just don't make any waves. As for home, Maher would eventually settle into a log cabin, about 500 square feet of pine patched with mud and clay, slightly off plumb, dark inside, but for a few small windows, a block from the main street, the governor's mansion, formerly a butcher shop. Most of the animal blood and viscera had been scrubbed from the floor and walls, but before Libby arrived in the spring, he would have to do something about the mice. Oh, Libby wasn't with him. Okay. Uh, can you can you be considered a 500 square foot mansion? Okay. Mhm. When word spread that the new man in charge of the territory had hitched his horse to a Virginia City post, Irish miners, laborers, and servants popped out of the gold diggings and dingy kitchens to greet the orator. His fame had grown since the surrender of the Confederacy, even as his soul sagged. The Irish Brigade, it was said on both sides of the conflict, had been one of the best fighting units in the war. In a long interview Robert E. Lee singled out the Irish warriors and gave particular praise to General Maher. Lee recalled the slaughter of immigrants trying to overtake the rebel line behind the rock wall above Fredericksburg. The Confederates mowed them down, and yet they kept coming. Lee marveled. Never were men so brave, he said. Their brilliant and hopeless assaults upon our lines excited the hearty applause of my officers and soldiers. And General Hill exclaimed, "There are those damn green flags again." Hearty applause. Moore had a different set of emotional memories of Fredericksburg, not of high minded military gallantry. Still, his name was starting to be burnished into legend. To Mar's surprise, there were Fenians in this tumble-down town tucked in a crease of the mighty Rockies, dozens of them, and very open about hatred of their country's oppressor. Also, the Irish of the territory counted among their ranks a world-class boxer, Hugh O'Neill. Earlier in the year, he was in the ring for the biggest cultural event in the territory, taking on an oversized saloon owner. A promoter charged $10 a seat to watch the brawl. It drew people from hundreds of miles around twice. O'Neill knocked out his opponent. Still, after 185 rounds, the referee called it a draw. Fenians and prize fighters, the foundations of New Ireland, they organized a welcome party in a torchlight parade punctuated by songs in defiance of England and love of the old country. The Fenians walked from one end of Alder Gulch to the other, finishing with a grand assembly in town. They carried banners that marked the year of the Young Ireland uprising. The general was touched. He gave them a taste of his oratorical skills, rusty after months out of the public eye, and pledged to govern in a fair way. The editor, Dinsdale, frowned on the Fenians in his midst, questioning their patriotism and telling his readers that the rebellion of 1848 was, in fact, a miserable failure. As the days grew shorter, Virginia City became even more claustrophobic. It was crowded with gossip and intrigue, grim-faced gamblers trying to fool prospectors in all-night games of three-card Monte, and walls holding the smell of stale cigar smoke. The town could not have been more isolated, pinned in by mountains and weather, without a telegraph connection or regular stagecoach. Earlier in the year, in the desolation of late winter, Virginia City had run out of food. A mob stormed a dry goods store and made off with sacks of flour, gunfire at their rear, fending off loneliness and fears that he had removed himself from any place that mattered. Maher threw himself into governing. With his goose quill pen in perpetual motion, he fired off letters and orders on stationery stamped Executive Office, Montana Territory. He made plans for public schools free of religious bias, angering Dinsdale, who doubled as the superintendent of education and had insisted that the King James Bible be part of a child's curriculum. Dutifully at first, and then less frequently, Maher consulted with the right-thinking citizens. A cultural crack grew to a chasm. The most prominent vigilantes and Republican leaders were also Freemasons. Their leader, Wilbur Sanders, was the Right Worshipful Grand Master of Virginia City's Masonic Lodge. The Masons and vigilantes were co-conspirators in a raft of executions. The Masons had taken a sacred oath. We knew each other by outward signs and met each other as brothers, wrote a founder of Montana's Freemasons. Their stated goal was the protection, improvement, and purification of our little society. In practice, That translated to meetings that were boiler room hot with anti-Catholic and anti-immigrant rhetorical steam. In Montana, the biggest question of the day was whether to convene a territorial legislature. The acting governor was urged by Sanders not to call a session or a convention that might lead to statehood because it would be dominated by Democrats. At first, Maher agreed with the right thinkers. Then he changed his mind, which infuriated them. He further aggravated the territorial elite by taking a strong position against granting monopolies to a handful of businessmen, including vigilantes, for a steamboat navigation and ownership of wagon trails. Roads and riverways belonged to all the people, Maher insisted. Viewed with suspicion when he arrived, Maher was, by midfall, an enemy of the secretive syndicate that had been running Montana by terror. They started a smear campaign, planting rumors of the acting governor as a besotted whoremonger. On his arrival in Virginia City, he became intoxicated and remained so. This is a quoting, right? A quote from maybe probably a paper or something. And remained so for a number of days in his room, polluting his bed and person in the most indecent and disgusting manner. I'd like to pollute your bed, Papa Smurf. One Republican attorney, William Chumacero, claimed in letter to an influential U.S. senator, "The Irishman," he wrote, "is beastly and filthy in the extreme, exhibiting all the natural proclivities of the people from whom he sprang." Neutral observers saw a different Thomas Maher, a drinker, yes, but a bon vivant and man of words who brought a dollop of elegance to a debauched town. In this latest chance to make a mark and build a life, Maher's love of argument and a good fight was revived, but Chumacero's opinion counted. He was the brother-in-law of Wilbur Sanders. In no time, Maher's enemies wore him down. Nature restored him. The sky overhead, especially at night, was an antidote to the indoor assaults on his character. Through the fall, strands of aspen trees glowed during weeks of balmy days. There was frost on the ground in the morning, the air cutting and crisp, but the afternoons warm to short-sleeved weather. The land itself beckoned possibility, with views from the territorial capital that stretched to the Ruby Range in one direction, the summits of the Madison in the other. On long rides to inspect the province under his authority, Maher reveled in the hurried rituals of the natural world at the curtain time of the year. Rivers snap happy with fat trout, herds of elk gorging on stiff grass, nimble-limbed pronghorns springing over fields, an osprey alighting on the bundled branches of a nest, falling asleep at night as winter approached. Wrapped in animal fur, Maher could stare up at jolting flashes of fluorescent green, the aurora borealis. "Nothing delights me so much as being on horseback," he wrote. In late November, Maher and a party of 5 set out to visit Jesuit missions. En route to Fort Benton on the Missouri, they followed the Madison north, camping one night not far from where 3 rivers formed the big artery that would feed into the Father of Waters. In fresh-hatched Helena, Maher was amused by the tent town of shacks and groggeries that were staked to Last Chance Gulch. "Every collection of log huts is called a city in this ambitious country," he wrote, recounting the journey in a long letter to Father de Smet, the much-traveled Jesuit of the West. As he rode north of Helena, The sky darkened and the temperature plunged. Mar was exuberant, in constant patter, even as snow started to fall. At dusk, the travelers found the log home of Paul Vermin, a former trapper. He threw together a stew of mountain sheep meat and brewed up pots of coffee. The wind raged, throwing snow against the cabin walls. The drama outside stirred Mar's need for interior drama. Their host had a tattered book of Shakespeare. Lucky man, Mar pronounced himself. He bundled up in his bison robe with a saddle for a pillow and read The Tempest deep into the night. Montana was starting to grow on him. It is a perfectly beautiful and delightful country, singularly rich and singularly grand, he wrote his friend George Pepper, the Irish Protestant minister from Ulster, now living in Ohio. We have too great a preponderance of Yankee blood out here. I want to see strong infusion of the rich, red, generous, royal Celtic blood to counteract the acidity and poverty of the other. In the West, a man could start clean and find his self respect in a patch of ground to call his own. Come out to Montana, take up and fence in your 160 acres under the Homestead Act in one of our wonderful, fertile, abundantly watered, and well timbered valleys. You will feel yourself a new man and an American citizen in full. The last sentence was as much a self description as a recruitment pitch. Mm, mm. More wonders lay ahead. Near the end of the Fort Benton journey, Mars party spent 3 days waiting out a snowstorm under the big tent of Father Xavier Cuppins, a tall, charismatic Belgian Jesuit who'd been working with the Blackfeet. The priest cooked up dinners of prairie hen and rabbit, his coffee laced with eau de vie from the Indians. The priest had heard about a place with towering geysers, steep gold plated canyons, and white crystallized formations that looked like wedding cakes the size of buildings. Yellowstone. He then saw it with his own eyes. Nothing in Europe could compare. I spoke to Maher about the wonders of Yellowstone, the priest recalled. His interest was greatly aroused by my recital. The acting governor was eager to see such a thing. If true, he told Father Cuppins he would do everything in his power to ensure that this American spectacle of fire and steam would become a park. While Maher was in the saddle, the vigilantes issued a new round of death sentences, as if no governing authority existed. They would occasionally refer to the quote acting one and laugh. It didn't matter what his title was, they had no use for him. The decision to kill a citizen was made in secret, the execution was not. The vigilantes asphyxiated their victims in the light of day and left them hanging well past the point of rigor mortis. On October 3rd, Con Kirby was strung up in Helena from the branch of a big pine called the Hanging Tree, at the corner of what would become Blake and Highland Streets. The same month, 3 men, nameless all, were hanged in Prickly Pear Gulch to the north. The following month, another 3 men were roped to Helena's hanging tree. Some died by strangulation, a painful, slow choking, others by a neck snap. As 1865 came to a close, the executioners had murdered 37 people in barely 2 years' time, the deadliest campaign of vigilante killing in American history. The author Frederick Allen later concluded, In November, a fight led to a fatality inside a saloon in Helena. Gamblers taking on other gamblers. Guns, knives, and fists were bared. One card player pointed a gun at another, James B. Daniels, and was stabbed to death. The vigilantes seized Daniels and turned him over to a Republican judge. The jury, at first divided, ultimately brought a conviction equal to manslaughter. For this, Daniels was sentenced to 3 years in a frigid territorial penitentiary. His defender said the penalty was too harsh. Daniels, they insisted, had acted in self defense against a card cheat who drew a gun. 32 citizens of Helena, including some of the men on the jury, petitioned the governor to pardon Daniels. Maher did not have that power. Only the president did, he felt, but he could grant a reprieve from the sentence while Daniels sought a presidential pardon. The convict, Tom Maher, knew what it was like to stare at the world from inside a cage, to feel unjustly punished, to be on the wrong side of authority. Under sentence in Tasmania, he'd lived among outlaws. His own father in law there, Benny's dad, had been banished for robbing a stage. Many of his fellow convicts in the penal colony were guilty beyond doubt, but a great many were not. And one of his earliest memories was of Waterford's old wooden bridge where Princess Helen was hanged by the British. After looking at the evidence, Marr ordered Daniels released. As well, Daniels was Irish. Ethnicity hadn't mattered, in Marr's view, during the New York riots. The mobs who burned Manhattan were violent criminals who should be brought to justice, as Marr condemned them. But Montana was a place where the Irish could start anew without being looked on as second class people. The vigilantes were infuriated. The acting one had dared to cross them and done so without showing the least respect. Already, Maher had angered the custodians of Montana law by siding with Democrats on keeping the King's Bible out of public schools, convening a legislature insisting on publicly owned roads and riverways. He was proudly and loudly Irish and Catholic, an affront to the Masonic order. Protestants and nativists, he feared no man in the territory, and he mocked those who disliked the immigrants who answered the call to New Ireland. Let the marrowless bigot carp and deprecate, he said in one Montana speech. Let the hungry Puritan with his nasal music importune the god of blue laws to save the Yankee from the witchcraft of St. Patrick's daughters and devilry of St. Patrick's sons. The Irish people in America will not and cannot forget the land of their birth, their sufferings, their dearest memories and proudest hopes. Still, he had kept his distance from the organized killers. Now, on the dirt streets of Virginia City, when the vigilante prosecutor passed Maher, he said nothing to the governor. Wilbur Sanders used his glare as a wordless warning. Eyes that were normally vacant lighting on a target. To him, Maher was already past tense. He is dead beyond all hope of resurrection, Sanders wrote to a friend. The Irishman shrugged it off. In a life of inexhaustible political pugilism, he'd fought the British Empire, the Know Nothings, and the Confederate States of America, a handful of self-appointed moral wardens in the vastness of the Rocky Mountain West did not make him cower. Who was Wilbur Sanders, anyway? The most vicious of my enemies, Maher wrote to the White House, addressing the complaints of the right-thinking citizens, an unrelenting and unscrupulous extremist. But Sanders was an extremist with a long reach. When James Daniels returned to Helena the day Maher let him out of jail, he was a free man awaiting a pardon. By 9 p.m. on the evening of his arrival, he was seized by the vigilantes. An hour later, Daniels was hanging from Helena's most notorious tree, his windpipe throttled, his boots, pants, and coat on, and Maher's reprieve in his back pocket. Even some of the pioneers of frontier justice were horrified by the suddenness of the killing. The Vigilance Committee committed an irreparable error in the execution of this man, wrote Nathaniel Langford, and Langford was a founding member of that committee. Still, his was a rare voice of dissent. The strangulation of Daniels was delivered with a blunt message to the governor. Witnesses reported seeing a note pinned to the dead man's chest. The acting one is next. Oh shit! Oh shit! Okay, so that's the end of chapter 20. So we'll pick it up on chapter 21 on Sunday, The Remains of a Life. Let's see how many pages are left. Chapter 21 begins at page 287, and the book ends on page 322. So we're almost done. The rest is source notes, which is a ton. It's like I'll show you. And I'll grab a card here. Okay, so hey, source notes are all this, and this is where we are. This is what's left in this book. So we know he's going to die. He doesn't have much longer, and it looks like he's got enemies. I mean, he's all got enemies, but it looks like it'd be connected to that spooky stuff. But you know what? It's like Terry's saying with those shows. Like if you know about the Wild West, um, the term Wild West, it like literally kind of means in a way wild. Like there's no law. Like it's scary because there's no real action. It's like the wild frontier. Um, and it's scary because he's like literally the governor, and so it's like, wow. um, so yeah, I'm curious to see how the rest of the book unfolds. But I'm so glad I was able to read to you tonight without um shaking and stuttering, and that's good. And I really appreciate you supporting me through um this process. I can't wait to bring in both puppies, have that's really my vision that makes me so happy. And you will be like, come on, Rex and Fila. So we'll get that. We'll get that. Uh all right. So I'm kind of 50-50 if I'll do a call tomorrow. I probably will because it doesn't need to be too long because it can take a lot out of me when I do like 4.5 hour call-ins just because I need my time with the cleaning and it's a lot. But probably a select people that'll have my number if I do it will call in. We could do like a quicker one and chat. Just for the time being and this time between getting the dog, making sure I can have my house inspected, have to be useful with my time spending. um, but you're definitely an important part of it. Very important part of it. It's just um all my ducks in the row, right? Anyway, um, yeah, wish me luck. I gotta be. Love you.